The only nickname I've ever had was Care Bear. And that's like the worst nickname ever. All of my friends had great nicknames. Take my friend Paulina, for example. She's called Polly, Peaster, P-Funk. Or my friend Eliza. She's called Eclair, Eli, even Lizard. And even Daniel has Danny, Dan, Bogues, and Bongo. But I was always Care Bear. I mean, what else can you do with the name Karen? So more than a few weeks ago, in Parashat Shemot, as we began the book of Exodus, my service was rescheduled for those who aren't in on the joke. As we began the book of Exodus, we met Moses' father-in-law, Reuel. Moses had killed an Egyptian and, fleeing the wrath of Pharaoh, headed for Midian, where he met his future wife, Zipporah, and her father, Reuel. And before the 10 inches of snow this past February, when my service was supposed to happen in Parashat Yitro, only a few chapters later, Moses' father-in-law comes back into the picture. But this time, instead of being called Reuel, the Torah calls him Yitro, or Jethro. And in Parashat Beha'alotcha in the book of Numbers, Moses' father-in-law is mentioned a third time. But this time, he is not called Reuel or even Yitro, but instead Hovav. The three names of Yitro have puzzled the rabbis since the time of the Talmud. One opinion is that his real name was, in fact, Hovav, and that his father was Reuel. A second opinion is that his real name was, in fact, Reuel, and that Jethro is just a title meaning his excellency. But the opinion that I like best, the one that speaks to me the most, is Rashi's. He says that Jethro was actually known by 7 different names. He was called Yeter, related to the Hebrew word yiter, to add, because he caused a section to be added to the Torah. He was called Yitro, to indicate that when he converted and fulfilled the commandments, the letter Vav was added to his name. He was called Chovav, lover, because he loved the Torah. He was called Reuel, the friend of God, as well as Putiel, afflicted of God. There are also 2 names that Rashi doesn't even explain, Heber and Kenny. So why 7 names? The Torah only refers to Moses' father-in-law with 3 names, Jethro, Reuel, and Chovav. Perhaps the secret to why Jethro has these different names can be found in a midrash from Midrash Tanhuma. According to this midrash, every person has 3 names. The first name is the one we are given by our parents, the one we receive when we're born. The next name is the name given to us by our friends and by our associates. It's who we are and who we are known as right now. And the final name, according to this midrash, is the one we acquire for ourselves, the name we are striving to be. The midrash ends by telling us that the most important of all of these is the last one, the name that we will earn for ourselves. First, we have the name that was given to us by our mom and dad, the name that we have been called since birth, the name that was most likely used by our parents when they were really, really mad. Karen Emily Kriger, stop hitting your brother. This is the name over which we have no control. For many of us, in the Ashkenazi Jewish tradition, we are named for a much-loved family member whom we never knew. Some of us have names that were completely random, and we are the first to give meaning to them. Now, I don't like to talk about this because I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, but my name was supposed to be Flora. My great-grandmother, Flora Davidson, passed away 3 months before I was born. And while Flora wasn't on the most popular names of 1983 list, my mom wanted to honor her much-loved grandmother. My parents told me they debated on my name for weeks, going back and forth between Flora, a handful of names that began with the letter F, and a name that they preferred. Well, we all know which one they decided upon, and thank God for that one. And even though I'm not named after Flora, she is still remembered today because of the story behind my unique name. Every time someone asks me if I am named for a relative, I tell them no, but then I tell them about my great-grandmother. The name that our parents have given us represents the past, what they wanted for us, and what they saw when they looked at our face for the first time. It's a symbol for where we came from. Historically, Jews were only given a first name, and the community relied on patronymics to identify an individual, such as David ben Yosef or Miriam bat Shmuel. Later on, beginning with the Sephardim, family names became popular and many began to identify Jews by their last name. Sometimes these names represented a trade the family was involved in, such as Silverman, Schumacher, or Miller. Other names tell where the family originated, such as Danziger from Danzig or Bogard from Bogard. There are many families who can trace their last name back to ancestors in the 11th century, while others had family who came to America through Ellis Island and had their name changed, think Moskowitz to Moss. Our name history is a huge part of who we are today and represents a time we didn't know and an identity which we've inherited. The second name described in Midrash Tanchuma is the one that we are called today. This is the name that is sometimes on our passport or credit card, but sometimes it's not. I was Care Bear when I was young, and I'm Karen today, and I will be Rabbi Karen in just over a year. It's the name of who we are right now at this moment. Some know us in a professional realm, and to them we are called rabbi, professor, or doctor. Others who are closer call us mom, dad, sister, or brother. So almost 3 years ago, as the early Rosh Hashanah service was coming to a close at Temple Emmanuel of Dallas, a gun suddenly went off. This is a true story. Not knowing what exactly had happened, the police were called. Amidst all of the confusion, the congregants finally learned that an elderly man rose for the Aleinu, and his legally concealed handgun fell to the floor, firing and injuring 3 people. The congregant was a former law enforcement officer and had forgotten to leave the gun in his car, as he normally did when he entered the synagogue for services. Extremely embarrassed, this congregant wrote a letter of apology to the members of the synagogue. Amongst other things, he specifically apologized to another congregant with whom he shared the exact same name for any humiliation the incident may have caused him or his family. It turns out quite a few people confused this completely innocent man for the man with the gun, and he was receiving numerous phone calls asking if he was the elderly person who had shot up the temple. It's easy for us to understand why someone would not want to share a name with this congregant. I mean, how popular is the name Adolf these days? The name that our peers call us is how we are identified today, how the world views us at this very moment. But remember, we all have a third name, and that's the name that we acquire for ourselves. This is the name toward which we are continually working, the name we are striving to become. We each have the ability to determine the person we will become. Think of Bernie Madoff or Michael Milken. These are both men who would have been remembered as prominent philanthropists who served on the board of many nonprofits, but will now be recalled for their financial misdeeds, which preyed heavily on many Jewish people, including their own family and friends, destroying numerous Jewish charities, foundations, and institutions. This is the name that they acquired for themselves, a name which is defined by their many illegal and immoral decisions. It doesn't have to be this way, though. There are countless people who have acquired a name for themselves that will help them be remembered in a positive light. My sister-in-law's name is Tenzin, which can be confusing in a Tibetan restaurant, since 90% of the Tibetans there are also named Tenzin. This is because they are all named for Tenzin Gyatso, the current Dalai Lama, a man who has come to stand for the promotion of basic human values and interreligious harmony. There's a whole generation of people named Franklin after our 32nd president, and Martin after Martin Luther King Jr. These are people whose name lives on because of what their name stands for. Shakespeare said it beautifully in Romeo and Juliet when he posed the famous question, what's in a name? Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is not just remembered today by the 3 names he is given in the Torah, or by the 7 names Rashi calls him. He is instead remembered for the advice and wisdom he passed on to Moses, thereby ensuring that the knowledge he acquired in his own life would live on past him. Today, each of us also has the opportunity to determine how we want to be remembered, not just by our name alone, but rather for the type of person we are and the legacy we will leave behind. May each of us in our own lives continue the search and struggle of obtaining a positive name for ourselves, one that truly speaks to the person we are on the inside. Amen. Daniel, you took my prayer.